My parents surprised my sister with the latest smartphone for Christmas. "You've earned it," Dad said with pride. I unwrapped my gift to find a notebook from a discount store and a pen that didn't work. Mom chuckled softly, and my sister joined in the laughter. I forced a smile, but that night, I walked away feeling hollow. Days later, my parents called me in. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year. Even as I grew older, I still felt that little spark of excitement as December approached. It wasn't about the gifts, I knew I wasn't a child anymore. It was the atmosphere, the twinkling lights in the living room, the scent of cinnamon and pine wafting through the house, and the warmth that enveloped everything despite the chill outside. Most of all, I cherished our family traditions. Every year, we followed the same Christmas morning routine. We would wake up early, still in our pajamas, and gather in the living room with mugs of hot chocolate in hand. Mom would always play that same old Christmas playlist, filled with songs I had heard countless times but still brought a smile to my face. Dad would hand out gifts one at a time, allowing everyone a turn to open something while the rest of us watched. It was something small, something familiar, something I thought we all treasured. This year, however, felt different. It started with subtle changes. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, my parents had been distant, barely acknowledging me unless they needed something. Conversations felt short and forced, as if they were merely going through the motions. My younger sister, Lily, on the other hand, was the center of their attention. They talked to her constantly about school, her soccer games, and her friends. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that it was nothing, that perhaps I was just reading too much into it. But deep down, I felt the truth, and I didn't expect Christmas morning to confirm it so clearly. That morning, I woke up to the sound of Lily laughing downstairs. The aroma of coffee wafted through the air, and for a brief moment, I smiled. I shook off the uneasy feeling in my chest, pushing aside the nagging thought that something was amiss. I made my way downstairs, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. As I stepped into the living room, the tree stood tall in the corner, glowing with soft, colorful lights. The usual pile of presents sat beneath it, perfectly wrapped with shiny bows. Mom and Dad were already on the couch, sipping their coffee, while Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, her face practically glowing with excitement. "There you are," Dad said, flashing me a quick smile. "We were just about to start without you." I sat down on the floor next to Lily, trying to shake off the feeling of unease creeping up my spine. Maybe I was just overthinking things, perhaps this year would feel like every other. Dad reached under the tree and grabbed a gift, handing it to Lily first, just like always. She tore into it, and I watched as she pulled out a pair of brand new sneakers, the ones she had been talking about nonstop for weeks. Her eyes lit up, and she looked up at our parents. "No way. These are amazing." Dad laughed. "We knew you'd love them." Mom chuckled, "There's plenty more where that came from, honey." I smiled at Lily, trying to match her excitement. "Nice. Those are cool," I said, but she barely glanced at me before moving on to her next gift. I sat quietly as she unwrapped present after present, high-end clothes, a gaming headset, a gift card to her favorite store. With each new item she revealed, I felt my stomach tighten. Then Dad handed her the big one, a sleek, perfectly wrapped box with a bright red bow. Lily's eyes widened as she grabbed it, practically ripping the paper off in one motion. Her jaw dropped as she held up the latest smartphone, still in its untouched packaging. "No way," she shouted. "This is incredible." Dad beamed. "You've earned it," he said, ruffling her hair. Mom clapped her on the back. "You work hard, kiddo. You deserve it." Lily grinned, turning the box over in her hands. "This is the best Christmas ever." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to smile. Then Dad turned to me. "Oh, almost forgot," he said, reaching under the tree. He pulled out a small, lumpy package wrapped hastily in thin paper. "Here you go." I took it slowly, suddenly aware of how silent the room had become. The wrapping crinkled in my hands as I peeled it away, revealing a flimsy notebook, the kind you find at a discount store, with a thin cardboard cover and lined pages that felt rough to the touch. I reached inside, thought you were special, but I failed to show it. I let my focus on your sister blind me to your needs, and I can't express how sorry I am for that. I know I can't change the past, but I want to make things right moving forward." I sat there, absorbing his words. It was a lot to take in, and I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to believe him, to accept his apology and return to the way things were, but another part of me was still hesitant. "You say that now, but what's going to change? How do I know this isn't just a moment of panic for you?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with uncertainty. He looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "I understand your skepticism. I've given you every reason to doubt me. But I promise you, I'm committed to changing. I want to be the father you deserve, the one who sees you and values you for who you are, not just as an afterthought." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "It's going to take time for me to trust you again. You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to be okay. I need to see that you mean it." "I get that," he replied, his voice earnest. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll talk to your mother, and we can figure out how to make this right together. I want to be there for you, to support you in everything you do. You're my son, and I've been a terrible father. I want to change that." As I listened to him, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the start of something new. Maybe I could finally be seen for who I was, not just as the shadow of my sister. "Okay," I said slowly. "But it's going to take more than just words. I need to see actions. I need to feel like I matter." "I promise you, I'll show you," he said, his eyes earnest. "Let's start fresh. I want to be part of your life, and I want you to know that you're important to me." After a long pause, I nodded. "All right. Let's see where this goes." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. My dad made an effort to reach out, to include me in conversations and activities. He started asking about my interests, my friends, and my life. It felt strange at first, but slowly, I began to open up. We went for walks, shared meals, and even watched movies together. It was a stark contrast to the silence that had filled our home for so long. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I turned to him. "You know, it's going to take time for me to fully trust you again. I've been hurt for a long time, and it's not something I can just forget." "I understand," he replied, his expression serious. "I'm here for the long haul. I want to earn your trust back, and I'm willing to put in the work. Just give me a chance." As the weeks turned into months, I began to see changes in our family dynamic. My parents started to communicate more openly, and I felt less like an afterthought. They made an effort to include me in family activities, and I found myself laughing and enjoying their company again. It was a slow process, but I could feel the walls I had built around my heart beginning to crumble. One day, as we decorated the house for the next Christmas, I caught my dad watching me with a smile. "You know, I'm really proud of you," he said, his voice warm. "You've grown so much, and I'm grateful to have you back in my life." I smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Thanks, Dad. It means a lot to hear you say that." As the holiday season approached, I found myself feeling a sense of excitement I hadn't felt in years. The lights, the decorations, the music, it all felt different this time. It was as if a new chapter was beginning, one where I could finally be myself without fear of being overlooked. On Christmas morning, as we gathered in the living room, I felt a sense of belonging wash over me. My parents were there, genuinely engaged and excited to share the moment with me. As we exchanged gifts, I realized that it wasn't about the presents anymore, it was about the love and connection we were rebuilding together. When it was my turn to open my gift, I unwrapped a small box to find a simple but meaningful item, a journal. It was a gesture that spoke volumes. My dad looked at me, his eyes filled with hope. "I thought you might like to write down your thoughts, your dreams. I want to know you better," to find her voice. She began to engage with me more, asking about my interests and sharing her own thoughts. It was a gradual process, but I could see her making an effort to connect with me on a deeper level. As the months passed, our family dynamics continued to shift. We started having regular family meetings where everyone could share their thoughts and feelings. It was a safe space, and I found myself opening up more than I ever thought I could. I shared my experiences, my struggles, and my hopes for the future. My parents listened, really listened, and it felt like we were finally building a bridge over the chasm that had once separated us. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I noticed how different things felt. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with laughter and genuine conversation. Dad looked at me and said, "I'm proud of the person you're becoming. You've shown so much strength, and I admire that." Hearing those words from him meant the world to me. It was a validation I had longed for, and it felt like a significant step forward in our relationship. Jane and I also found common ground. We began to bond over shared interests, and our sibling rivalry transformed into a supportive friendship. We would spend weekends together, exploring new places and trying out new activities. It was refreshing to see her in a new light, and I realized that she had grown too. We both had our struggles, but we were learning to navigate them together. Looking back, I could see how far we had all come. The journey wasn't without its challenges, but it was worth it. I had learned to advocate for myself, to voice my needs, and to stand firm in my worth. My family had learned to recognize and appreciate me for who I was, not just in comparison to Jane. 3 years after that pivotal Christmas morning, I found myself reflecting on the changes. I was living in my own apartment, a small but cozy space that felt like a sanctuary. The walls were adorned with photos, some new, some old, each telling a story of growth and resilience. There was even a picture from last Christmas, capturing a moment of joy with my family, genuine smiles lighting up our faces. The road to this point hadn't been easy. The first year after I left was filled with uncertainty and adjustment. Even after our initial reconciliation, there were moments when old habits threatened to resurface. I remember the first family dinner I attended after moving back home. Jane had just received a promotion at her job, and for a fleeting moment, I saw Dad start to make that familiar comparison. But he caught himself, meeting my eyes with an apologetic look. Instead of comparing, he turned the conversation to me, asking about my new project at work. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. Mom took longer to adjust. She had always been the quieter parent, often following Dad's lead. But slowly, she began to find her voice. She started engaging with me more, asking about my interests and sharing her own thoughts. It was a gradual process, but I could see her making an effort to connect with me on a deeper level. As the years went by, our family continued to grow closer. We celebrated milestones together, supported each other through challenges, and created new traditions that included everyone. I felt a sense of belonging that I had longed for, and it was liberating to know that I was valued for who I was. In the end, I realized that standing up for myself had not only changed my life but had also transformed my family. It had pushed us all to confront our shortcomings and work towards a healthier, more loving dynamic. I had learned that it was okay to demand respect and that my voice mattered. Reflecting on everything, I felt a sense of peace. I had taken a difficult path, but it had led me to a place of understanding and connection. I was no longer the invisible child, I was a valued member of my family, and that made all the difference. As I looked around my apartment, I felt grateful for the journey that had brought me here. I had learned to embrace my worth, to stand tall in my identity, and to cherish the relationships that mattered most. And while the past would always be a part of me, I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. Forming her own relationship with me. It started with coffee dates, just the two of us, where she'd really listen to what I had to say. No comparisons, no expectations, just genuine interest in my life and who I was as a person. The real test came when I decided to switch careers. I had been working in finance, following the path everyone expected, but my heart wasn't in it. What I really wanted was to pursue music production, something I'd been passionate about since high school but had never dared to voice. The old me would have kept quiet, stuck to the safe path to avoid disappointing anyone, but I wasn't that person anymore. I called a family meeting, something we had started doing monthly after everything that happened. Sitting in the living room, the same room where the Christmas disaster had unfolded, I told them about my decision. The silence that followed felt endless. Jane spoke first, surprising me. "That's amazing," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Remember when we were kids and you used to mix songs on that old laptop? You were always so good at it." I blinked, taken aback. I didn't even know she remembered that. Dad leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Are you sure about this? It's a big change. There was concern in his voice, but not judgment. That was new. I replied, bracing myself for the disappointment I half expected to see. Instead, he nodded. Then we'll support you. Just tell us what you need. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. We want you to be happy, sweetheart. Really happy, not just doing what you think we want. That conversation would have been unimaginable 3 years ago, but here we were, talking openly and honestly, each of us trying in our own way to be better. The changes weren't just in my family, I changed too. Learning to stand up for myself that Christmas morning had awakened something in me. I started therapy, working through years of feeling invisible and second best. I learned that it wasn't just about my family's behavior, it was about how I'd internalized it, how I'd learned to make myself smaller to fit their expectations. Jane and I started building a real relationship, not one based on competition or resentment. We found out we actually had a lot in common when we weren't being pitted against each other. She became one of my biggest supporters when I started my music production business, even investing some of her savings to help me get started. Last month, I produced my first album for an up-and-coming local artist. When it was finished, I invited my family to the studio for a private listening session. Watching their faces as the music played, seeing their genuine pride and interest, I felt something heal inside me. Dad didn't once mention that Jane's corporate job was more stable, and Mom didn't make any worried comments about financial security. They just listened, really listened, just like they had learned to listen to me. After the session, as we were leaving the studio, Jane pulled me aside. You know, she said, I used to be jealous of you too. I looked at her, surprised. What? Why? You were always the favorite. She shook her head. You were always so sure of who you were, even when you were quiet about it. I was just trying to be what they wanted. When you left that Christmas, it made me realize how much I was playing a role too. That conversation with Jane opened up a whole new understanding between us. We'd both been trapped in roles we never chose, she as the golden child, me as the invisible one. Breaking free of those roles had allowed us both to become who we really were. Dad changed the most dramatically. The stern, distant father who had given me the dollar store Christmas gift became someone who called regularly just to check in, who shared his own vulnerabilities and admitted when he was wrong. Last week, he confessed that he'd been raised in a similar environment of favoritism, always compared to his sister, never quite measuring up. I did to you what was done to me, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't even realize I was repeating the pattern until you had the courage to walk away. Mom found her voice too. She started standing up more, not just following Dad's lead. She began sharing stories about her own struggles with feeling invisible in her family and how she projected those feelings onto our family dynamic without realizing it. The healing wasn't linear, there were setbacks, moments when old patterns emerged, times when I had to remind them and myself of the boundaries we'd established. But each time we stumbled, we got better at catching ourselves, at communicating, at making things right. This Christmas will be different. We're having dinner at my apartment, my choice, my space, my rules. Jane's bringing her new girlfriend, whom she